Wentz steps up. Here comes the rush. He is going deep, and it is caught. And in for a touchdown, Deshaun Jackson.
Give the people what they want.
Reuben, I figured we'd start this podcast with a traditional game of rock, paper, scissors. What do you think?
Rock, paper, scissors. It's a great game. I love competing. It's awesome. Any kind of competition, I just brings out the best in me. I think competition is great for all of us. What a beautiful day, Dave. The sun is out. It's a nice, cool morning. My dog's out here walking around. Who knows what she's doing? I'm just so happy to be here. I love podcasts. What a podcast. What a day.
You know how much coffee it would take for me to get to Nick Sirianni's level? I have a big mug right in front of me, but this is not enough. That was certainly something. This is the Eagle Eye Podcast. Brought to you by Car Shop. Want certified used cars reconditioned like new. That's Car Shop, formerly Car Sense. With Reuben Frank, I'm Dave Zangaro. We're going to talk about the press conference with Nick Sirianni, Howie Roseman, and Andy Weidel. We're going to start with Nick Sirianni's demeanor because people were talking about that. But we're going to go through the whole presser because there was some really important stuff in there. And I don't want everyone to get sidetracked by the rock, paper, scissors game. It became kind of a funny talking point yesterday. Some people were mad about it, but we'll talk about that. Don't get me wrong, but we want to get a little deeper into everything they said in that pre-draft press conference. And then at the end, I want to go through, I had a crowdsourced mock draft that was a lot of fun, and we'll go through some of the results of that. But let's start with Sirianni, because that was kind of the talk of town on Wednesday when they had that press conference. And after he had an awful performance in his first press conference. He was nervous. It was a terrible situation to put him in. He looked really comfortable yesterday, and we're starting to see his personality a little bit more.
Yeah, and I don't really know how anybody can be put off by it. I think, you want that. You want a coach who's got some enthusiasm and some fire to him and passion and energy. You can tell his love for football, and honestly, that wasn't always the case last year with Doug. I mean, he and Doug had a different demeanor, and it worked. I mean, for quite a while, it worked for him. He was, he didn't show that side of his personality. I think he did have it, maybe not to that extreme, but he never showed it with us. But it was genuine. And I think that's the thing to remember. It wasn't a put on. He wasn't trying to be someone or act a certain way. It came off as natural, and it just came off as, here's a guy that just loves talking about football and loves talking ball, as they like to say, and had a true passion and a true enthusiasm for it. And to me, it's all about being real. If you're real, it doesn't matter what your personality is. Vince Lombardi was like the quietest guy, never said a word to anybody. One the greatest coach ever. But as long as you're genuine, and this was certainly genuine, and I don't know how you watch that and don't think this is a guy that loves football, that loves coaching, and I don't know if he's going to be a good coach or not. It's going to really depend on the players they get him for the most part, but I liked what I saw. I thought it was a side of him, and it's a side that we haven't really seen. I mean, Andy certainly was never like that. Chip was so different. I mean, he talked as fast as Nick.
It was a much different fast talking.
Yeah, but it was all very scripted and guarded, and he never really let you in. I mean, he was just talking fast. Really the only coach I could compare it to was Ray Rhodes, who he had no filters, and it was similar in some ways to that. But I've
heard people compare it to Dick Vermeil. I know that was before you covered, but I've heard that comparison.
I don't think you've ever said that before, Dave.
I know I've never said that, but I've heard that comparison too. That Dick Vermeil was an excitable guy, so I guess that's there. I mean, we're talking a long time ago.
Yeah. So
it kind of reminds me of John Gruden a little bit.
A little bit.
Pete Carroll, maybe.
Gruden, I never got the sense that Gruden. I mean, to Gruden, it's all an act.
I don't think so.
I do. I covered Gruden, and Gruden. I mean, Gruden's always wanted to be on TV. He's always wanted to be Yeah, I don't think that's really who Gruden is. I really don't. I don't know, but because I mean Gruden's not that way in real life, but Nick is, you know. So, but yeah, I mean it's we'll see. I mean it's one press conference. You don't want to get too carried away and make any judgments and draw any conclusions. But the notion that NFL players aren't going to respond to him because he's effusive is silly to me. As long as these guys know their X's and O's and garner the players' respect and they're themselves, as long as they're genuine and they're themselves, they don't try to be someone else, and they treat players fairly, the players are going to respond.
Yeah, I mean, all players care about is if you put them in a position to play well and ultimately make money in the sport and win championships. Like that's all they care about. So. But on the flip side of that, you'd rather a guy show his personality as long as you're right. It has to be genuine. It doesn't mean he's going to be a good coach or a bad coach. If you drew any conclusions one way or the other from a press conference, bad news. I mean, that's not the way it goes. But I do like that he's letting his personality fly, and I hope he continues to do it. I mean, we've seen coaches kind of get beaten down at times. In tough media markets where eventually they're like, I'm not playing the game anymore. I don't want to give you too much of myself. I hope that doesn't happen here because I enjoy it. It's fun for us. I mean, it's fun to watch. I was exhausted yesterday after watching him. I joked that I needed a nap before we could write anything. My favorite part of the press conference was when he just started answering questions that weren't addressed to him. And he was I just want to jump in here. I love that. I like that. And that's taking ownership, and that's him feeling comfortable next to his bosses, really.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to remember is, it's not an easy situation because, I mean, Howie, especially Howie, but Andy also, I mean, Howie runs the organization. I mean, he's the top guy in, other than Jeff Lurie, he runs everything. And so for Nick to be himself, he's only been around Howie a few months, and say what you want about Howie. I mean, that's a difficult position to be in as a coach. This is the guy that's going to hire you and fire you and, decide if you get a new contract. And, to be yourself in those circumstances and not worry about what's he going to think of me or what's he going to think if I show this side of me. I thought that was important. Yeah. I think you can't lose sight of the fact that his superiors are sitting right next to him, and he was still able to get his personality through and be himself. That was big.
Let's talk about rock, paper, scissors. I don't want to spend too much time on it because it got way overblown, I thought, yesterday. Look, pre-draft interviews are weird places, right? We've heard a lot worse coming out of pre-draft interviews than Nick Sirianni playing rock, paper, scissors with draft prospects. If that's the worst of it, the Eagles are doing fine. And it's not like they're gauging their draft board. They're not setting up the draft board based on rock, paper, scissors, or even what they learn about the competitiveness. It's a very, 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 and it's a very small part of the process. But I get it. I mean, and Sirianni's point was like, if you can compete, if you care about winning that, then you can care about winning anything. And I understand that this is an organization that won 4 games last year. People are fed up with it from top to bottom, and it doesn't necessarily look great to be talking about rock, paper, scissors from a fan's perspective. But let's not go crazy here. It's not like they're saying Jalen Waddle didn't care about rock, paper, scissors. If he's there at 12 or not, that's not at all what's going on here.
No, you're just trying to get as much information as you can, get to know these guys as much as you can. And sometimes that means disarming them. Sometimes it means, trying to do something that no other team is doing to really, find out what you can about them. And I think every team does that. I don't, you hear stories at the combine about some of the stuff teams are asking players, and sometimes the players will talk about it. It's like, it's actually a question you hear all the time at the combine. What's the weirdest thing you've been asked by a team? I mean, you hear that all the time. And so I think it's part of the process. It's what teams do. You're always trying to find that bit of information or that side of someone's personality that could give you some insight into what kind of player he's going to be. So that's all it is.
Or how he's going to handle life in the NFL, how he's going to handle making money. Like all those things are important. And it's it's obviously an inexact science. And maybe it's stupid. It might be stupid to play rock, paper, scissors. It might be stupid to play Jeopardy. But a lot of this is also forcing guys in and out of their comfort zones to see how they react to it. And you might scoff at the idea of football coaches basically playing the role of like minor league sports psychologists, but that is in a way a role they're going to have to play as a head coach anyway. So I had no problem with it. I thought it was I was happy we had that anecdote. I was glad he told us that. I understand why some fans are hearing it like, oh, you got to be kidding me. You know, our team stinks and they're playing rock, paper, scissors. I get it, but I think it kind of got blown out of proportion.
I think people are just looking for negatives right now. And I understand that. Team went, 4-11-1 last year. It was a disaster. The quarterback's gone, the coach is gone. And I mean, there's just a really negative perception around the team. And that happens when you win 4 games in the worst division in the history of football. So people are kind of looking to latch on to what other disasters, what else can go wrong. I had someone once who owned a company tell me that ideally when he was interviewing people for jobs, and he said he hadn't done this, but he thinks about it, he would have them play Tetris. He said there's no one thing you can learn more from about a person than, it shows your ability to think quickly and deal with unexpected, you get 4 straight like red bars coming down or whatever, and just your adaptability, dexterity, mental dexterity. I would get that job because I kick ass at Tetris. It's like the only thing in the world I'm good at, piano and Tetris. But yeah, I think everybody that's been interviewed for a job, there's always that question that is out of the blue, just has nothing to do with anything. You're just trying to see how that person responds and learn as much as you can. I was surprised that anybody was complaining about it. Every team does this stuff. Every team has those out of the box methods to learn. I mean, you're trying to get an edge as far as drafting players here at number 12. You're trying to get an edge over every other team. What do we know about him that other teams don't know? And the way to do that is to do the interviews and interview his teammates and just get as much info as you can on the player. And whatever it takes is fair game as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. And what's the downside here?
None.
I mean, unless they're stacking the board based on results, which they're not, then there's really not a downside.
If they draft rock in the first round, paper in the second round, and scissors in the third round,
which one, if I don't want to give away your secrets here, but you're playing rock, paper, scissors more times than not, what are you throwing first?
I don't play rock, paper, scissors, Dave. It's not, I don't think I've ever done that. I don't think I've ever played rock, paper, scissors.
What?
I don't sit around and play rock, paper, scissors. That's not it's not like.
No, but I don't either. Like, it's not like my pastime, but like, me and a buddy are like, who shoots first? And rock, paper, scissors. No, never.
No.
You want to play right now?
No. I mean,
Okay.
you spin your tennis racket, see who serves first, the W comes up or down or the Y, whatever.
Yeah, no. That's much less crazy.
I didn't say it's crazy. I just said I've never done it. I don't do it. I didn't say it's crazy.
Okay. Let's move on because you don't want to play rock, paper, scissors with me. The trade back. This is the first time talking to Howie since they traded back from 6 to 12. And he kind of gave us a Howieism. Flexibility creates opportunity. That's a pretty good Howie quote. I get what he's saying.
He had that written down. He's like, I'm going to get this into an answer.
Yeah, somehow. And he did. It's a good answer. Because It was a big trade, and the timing of it was interesting for sure because it was, a month before the actual draft. And he didn't say, he was kind of asked the question with the framing of the quarterback position. And while he didn't specifically address the quarterback position, I think we can all kind of read between the lines a little bit at a certain point, and we can see the situations. And he's right. I mean, having those extra picks gives them a ton of options next year, and they have options this year too. If for some reason they want to trade back up or they want to trade down, they can do whatever they want now. I mean, they don't have to stay at 12. And I think there's a very good chance they don't.
Yeah, I agree. Just A, because it's Howie, and B, because it makes sense. I mean, I do think 12 isn't the worst place, especially if teams keep trading up in front of them. But it's Howie, and how many times has Howie stayed? And I mean, he's already moved out of that spot, but out of 6. I hated the trade when it first happened, but I'm starting to like it a little more. 6 to 12. I mean, but you just got to get the right player at 12 or wherever you end up. That's the thing that scares me, is that there's much less risk involved at 6. So you're going to get a player at 6, a better player at 6, or with a 12 and another first round pick. What are you going to end up with? More assets? And in the Eagles, estimation, it's the latter. But yeah, I think he's going to keep moving as much as he can to create that, those opportunities. They know that they need multiple, they need a volume of talented young players. And the more picks you have, the more good picks you have, more chances you have to do it. But the odds that you're going to get an all-time great go down. So it's an interesting strategy. I think Howie's strategies work, but then at some point you have to take a player. At some point you have to stop with the games and the trades and the flip-flopping picks and adding picks and doing all that stuff, which he's good at. And you have to say, we want this player. And that's the part that scares me.
Yeah, I think it's fair that he's just very good at knowing value. It's the picking of the players that's the problem. And the frustrating thing about this trade back is, like, we're not going to know for years, because at least 2 years, because we have to see what they do with that first rounder next year. But yeah, I still think it's tough to miss out on the guy I'm looking at is Jamar Chase. I think he's probably going to be there at 6, and to miss out on him sucks. I mean, that's a tough blow. Now, if he's gone and Pitts is gone, then you look at 6 and you think, oh, well, maybe that makes sense to trade back. And I'm guessing they have some sort of idea about the way the board's going to go. He mentioned that once he found out it was San Francisco moving up, which he had to know because he was moving back to 12. But he said, we knew that San Francisco moving up means another quarterback. So then there's an even greater chance that a good player falls to us at 12. And they don't, let's be clear though, they don't make the trade at 12 if they're not willing to draft at 12. They might move up if someone starts to slide, like say Jamar Chase or Pitts starts to slide, or even like a guy like Surtain is there. Like they might move up, but they don't make the trade to 12 if they're not willing to sit there and draft someone, because there's no guarantee you can trade. That's the other part of this. And how he mentioned, like, it gives us flexibility to move up and down. You got to find someone willing to do it. And that's not always the case, but it is important to point out that, and he's mentioned this before, but those conversations happen now. So like, if the Eagles trade up to the 8th pick on draft night, they already know the compensation of what it's going to take to do it. And the Panthers know, okay, if this player is available at 8 and we don't really necessarily want that player, the Eagles do, we can accept this offer that's on the table from them and we can just get it done then.
Right. And, he talked about offers that they've got that they've already, turned down because the compensation wasn't right for them. So, the stuff, it's going back and forth every day. I mean, he's on the phone with teams every day, and I'm sure there's a lot more trades that don't happen. I'm sure some are really close and then end up not getting made. I can't get past, what if over the next 5 years, the three best receivers in the league are Jamar Chase, DK Metcalf, and Justin Jefferson? I mean, it's not that outrageous. Or the three top young receivers. I mean, it's, at some point you got to draft a player, and you got to stop moving the pieces around and say, all right, this is my guy.
Yeah. And even if they don't trade out of 12, what percentage would you put it on that they're going to make a trade during the draft?
100.
Yeah, they're not going to pick 11 players, are they?
No, I think, and I still don't think they're going to. I think it's more likely they get out of 37 than they get out of 12, actually.
Get out or move up?
Just move up. Yeah, just get out of that spot by moving up. I mean, 12 is moving up or down. 37, I think, would be moving up into the end of the first, possibly. I think that's more likely. I think there's a fair chance they stay at 12, but I think there's less chance they stay at 37.
Yeah, I'd try to move up. I don't know what it would cost, but to get another guy in the first round with that 5th-year option, that's valuable to me. We'll see if they do it. I think there's a good chance. All right. The next thing on the list here, in the framing of that question about the trade back, he was asked about Jalen Hurts and what it means. Once they trade back, does that mean Jalen Hurts is the guy? Howie doesn't answer it. Goes over to Nick Sirianni, says, well, I'm not naming a starter at any position right now. I wasn't surprised about this. I think the Eagles have to leave it open for now, because what if a situation happens where I think it's unlikely, but what if a quarterback does fall and they want to get him and then they've put themselves in a box? There's no reason to put yourself in a box right now.
Yeah. I thought he could have said something nice about Jalen there. There's a lot to like about the way Jalen played last year. He's a promising young kid, but there's a lot's going to happen between now and opening day. And, the whole thing about we're not ready to name anyone a starter. Well, Nick, what role will Fletcher Cox play in your defense? Who's your starting center? Well, Luke Juriga, could have a really good training camp. So that whole thing about, there's a bunch of guys that we know are starters. So yeah, competition at every spot. You're not going to have, Raekwon Williams competing with Fletcher Cox for starting defensive tackle spot. So that said, I understand it. And yeah, there's a chance that, if Trey Lance, these things happen. If Trey Lance starts dropping and, they think they can get him, they'll get him. And, they don't want people saying, well, you said Jalen Hurts was your starter. I thought he could have said something nice about him there.
That's fair. But I also think in this case, Jalen Hurts doesn't shy away from competition. You know what I mean? If I think it's probably the right play with that player. It's about knowing your players at a certain point. And I think they know how Jalen Hurts will respond if he's not handed something. If they tell him, you got to win your job, dude. Like you're a 2nd-round pick from a year. Like you haven't played 4 games, I think they know that he'll respond well to it, better than other quarterbacks would have. And I think that matters.
I can't imagine who you're thinking of, but I think that's true. I don't disagree. I didn't think he would say Jalen's a starter. I just thought, maybe, Jalen's in the mix. He did some really good things last year. We don't even know who's going to be on the roster on September, whatever opening day, September 9th or whatever. But I can see where he's coming from.
And Jalen Hurts is a starter.
Well, right now he is, yeah. And I think it's 90%.
I think some people took it as, does that mean Flacco's going to?
No, it has nothing to do with Flacco.
Yeah.
Flacco's the backup. It's not like Flacco's going to win the job. I don't think that comment had anything to do with Flacco.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to point it out because some people heard Flacco's comments when he came here about, I'm coming here to compete. And then they hear the GM and the head coach say, "Oh, we don't have a starting quarterback," that doesn't mean that. Even if there's some kind of fake competition in training camp, this organization would have to be they'd have to be off their rocker to even consider that.
Tracy Rocker.
They'd have to be off their Tracy Rocker to consider that.
Yeah, no, I think this had. I just did it again. I think this had nothing to do with Flacco. If there's competition, it's going to be between Jalen and someone that's not on the roster right now. Very small chance they trade for somebody. Extremely small. I mean, and they could draft a quarterback. You don't get quarterbacks in the middle rounds, but it is possible they would draft a guy not.
It's rare. It's rare to get a quarterback. You can.
Oh yeah. I mean, Russell Wilson and Nick Foles. The only third round. Dak Prescott as well.
Fourth round.
Yeah, but it's rare, and I think Nick and Russell Wilson are the only third round quarterbacks to win a Super Bowl drafted like in the last 30 years, and they were drafted in the same third round, which is interesting.
They were like 15 picks apart.
Yeah, like 13, 12. Yeah, something like that. Who would you rather have drafted?
What?
Nick Foles or Russell Wilson? If Russell Wilson's here, I mean, they probably win a Super Bowl, maybe, but
maybe they win it like a normal team wins a Super Bowl if Russell Wilson gets drafted.
Yeah, but there wouldn't have been a Philly special. There wouldn't have been all those. Do you think they would have won more than one? I mean, they've won the same amount. It's not like Russell's won two.
Yeah, but Nick had some help. It wasn't like he started that whole year.
No, that's true.
What are you talking about right now?
I don't know. Just think how much would have been different if they drafted Russell Wilson. We wouldn't have.
Yeah, this is like the butterfly effect thing here. Like it would have changed the trajectory of the league. I get it, but yeah, Russell Wilson.
Yeah, it's like in Back to the Future when the photo of Marty's family starts disappearing during his guitar solo. Well, that's two movie references in 1 year. Might have been the same movie. I don't even know. Anyway, yeah. I guess that's a fair answer. I just think the whole Nick thing was so uniquely Philly. It's hard to imagine.
It was perfect, but I mean, Russell Wilson.
Yeah,
I do subscribe to the butterfly effect theory, though.
Oh yeah.
Do you like if you were to go back in history? I'd be scared to touch anything because I'd be afraid of what kind of colossal effect it would have on the future.
Yeah, but you can't go back to the future. You can't go into the future, so it's kind of irrelevant. It's kind of a thing for Isaac Asimov fans and sci-fi fans to think about.
Well, if you have the capability to go into the past, you can get back to the future.
How do you know?
If someone comes up with the technology,
the rules of time travel on
if someone comes up with the technology to send us back into the past, we can alter time, and you can also get to the future.
You're trying to make up rules for time travel on an Eagles podcast.
I am, yeah.
Hey, Beer Wing Sports, PJ Wellahans is the place to be to get all three. Local sports fans gather together to catch all the action at your neighborhood PJs. Visit pjspub.com to find a location near you. And by the way, I just saw a new PJ's location near me over on Route 611 in Horsham. And it wasn't there last time I drove by that intersection. It's there now, and I'm going to go soon.
That's exciting. All right, Rube. So the one big thing from that press conference that I think it got overlooked was ESPN's Tim McManus asked Howie Roseman a question with the preface that I'm paraphrasing here, but it's well known that you guys went against your draft board last year for your first two picks. That was the preface of the question. Howie didn't deny that. I mean, that's a pretty big admission that they went against their draft board for Jalen Reagor and Jalen Hurts last year. And we've heard this before, that the Jalen Reagor pick was Howie almost picking his coaching staff over his scouting staff for the player. And it brings up a lot of questions because we're about to enter these two just incredibly important drafts for this franchise. There's a new coaching staff in place. I mean, we're talking about the trajectory of this franchise hinges on these next two drafts, and there are a lot of reasons to be really worried about it.
Yeah, no, that's that's definitely true. I mean, amid all the optimism, I think that Nick has is the reality that Howie just hasn't been able to, or the whole front office hasn't been able to supply the roster with talent, and there's very little there, and Howie's still making the final call, and in some cases not listening to his scouts. And yeah, that's cause for alarm. I mean, they all talked about how how they are on the same page during this whole process, the pre-draft process. But if you get into the room and it's time to pick and you're picking the wrong player, you got to figure out where the disconnect is. And obviously there's different coaches there now for the most part. But basically Howie's got to know better. I mean, if he's making the final call, he's got to know better. But yeah, that was kind of I was shocked the way he answered that. I thought he would say, whoa, let's not, I'm not, he would, I thought he would say, I'm not going to address the first part of that, but, here's the process. But he didn't. Assuming it registered and he heard the whole question, he certainly did not deny it. And that was very telling.
Yeah. And I think, we've read about the dysfunction in the building, and there obviously has been some, and you can see why that's bred. If you're a scout, you're on the road your entire career, basically. You're grinding and you're giving player evaluations, and then the board is set, and then you got GM going rogue and picking whoever the coaches want, or maybe whoever the owner wants. Let's throw that out there. I mean, that's disheartening. It makes you feel like your work's going to waste. So I think it's very important for this franchise to start pulling in the same direction. And it's not always going to be easy. It's not like they're all going to have the same player evaluations, but a big step to that is the scouts and the scouting department understanding the players and the types of players that the coaches want for their systems. Because you don't have that situation where you're choosing coaches over scouts necessarily if the scouts look at it from the way the coaches look at it in terms of the types of players and how they'll be used in those systems. So I think that's at least encouraging that it seems like the Eagles are making a real effort this offseason. We'll see if it works, but at least they're making an effort to try to get on the same page.
Yeah, it sounds like it, until it's draft day and, but these decisions have to be made, before then. But yeah, you're so right. I mean, if you're the scout that, spent time talking to Justin Jefferson's high school coach and his older brother and his teammates and his coaches, and you're calling Andy Weidel and saying, hey, this guy's a can't miss. This guy's going to be a flat out stud. He's got it all. He's got the whole package. He's a good guy. He's going to be a good locker room guy. And then they go against you. I mean, you just spent a year making sure you knew everything about this guy. You might have played rock, paper, scissors with him, for crying out loud. And you're right. It's that's not good. And it sounds like that's what happened. And they got to figure that out. I mean, we just say draft good players, but so much goes into that. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I mean, the whole traditional, friction between coaching and scouting. The teams that do well, the teams that succeed, tear down that wall. They break through that. And I think I remember Lori saying when they opened the NovaCare complex that one thing they wanted to do was like integrate scouting and coaching in the same part of the building. Just so they weren't, because at the vet there was the whole, the coaches were on the first floor and this, the scouting department is on the front office on the fourth floor, and it became a whole first floor versus fourth floor. It was like a thing, and the better you can, and that was Andy's big thing. I mean, the better you can break that down, the more success you're going to have. And I mean, my favorite Andy Reid quote ever was, you got to have everybody pulling in the right direction. You think of a tug of war, it's just, if you have everybody on one side, it's gonna be over really quickly. So I don't know if they have that. And like you said, it's going to be a while before we really know if, everything they said makes sense, and I appreciate it, but we won't know. And that's the thing about evaluating players. If this draft doesn't work, well, we have 3 first-round picks probably next year. You can keep putting off that decision on what are you going to do with your GM. But that's another story. But yeah, they got to start nailing some of these picks in a nutshell.
Yeah, and I think it's probably harder now to get your coaching and scouting staffs on the same page, because there's the paranoia level in the league has risen to the point where your circle of people who really know, and we talked about this on a previous pod, but the circle of people who actually know what's going on and who you're going to pick, it increasingly collapses and it gets smaller. So I think there's like this inherent lack of transparency, but you have to try to make it as transparent for the people within your organization as you can, because you don't want them to think the GM is just say, screw the draft board, I'm going to do whatever I want. You have to be able to, I think if you're Howie, you have to be able to say, look, I did this and this is why I did this. I need you to understand why we made this decision, because it's so easy to see how one side or the other side can just get pissed off and be like, my opinion, you talk about collaboration and the Eagles talk about collaboration, but then there's not really a collaboration. It's all about what the GM wants or what the owner wants or what the coaches want. And and now you have the analytics department, which has become a much bigger deal in recent years. So now you already had a tug of war. Now you have another side kind of pulling on it. It's a lot to pull together. And I don't think you're ever going to totally agree, right? Like, I think there's going to be disagreements on player evaluations, and maybe you'll never avoid that. But at least if you're looking at players the same way, you can minimize that natural tug of war, right? I think you can minimize it, because if I'm looking at a receiver and I know exactly, and Nick Sirianni talked about kind of explaining, he used receiver as an example, which shouldn't be a surprise, but if I'm looking at a receiver, I'm looking at Jalen Waddle, and I know exactly how Nick Sirianni would use him in his offense. I think that goes a long way for the scouting department. And it sounds great to talk about it, but you're right. I mean, until they put it into practice, it's just talk.
It goes back as far as, I mean, when Buddy, I hate, going back to, it's like Nick Sirianni is like, I hate keep going back to the Colts stories, but, Buddy Ryan would go in press conferences and insult the scouts. I mean, that's how bad it was. And that was the norm back then. That was old time NFL. It was like they hated each other. They didn't work together. He was asked about, actually it was Bill Davis, Bill Davis's dad, Chip's defensive coordinator's dad was Eagles like vice president of personnel for like 10 months. And somebody was there. I'll never forget. We were out after practice talking to Buddy. We were on a field that's now a Citizens Bank Park parking lot, but that's where the practice field used to be, right adjacent to kind of just by the Schuylkill, next to that restaurant that used to be Kazmiri's. But anyway, Kazmiri's, is that what it was? Anyway, I digress. Somebody asked a question that started out, Buddy, Bill Davis said, and Buddy's like, oh, hell, I don't care what Bill Davis says. He got a job. He's got a title. That's about it. Like, imagine that. I mean, how are you going to work together? And, and Buddy saw himself as the GM. So he didn't acknowledge that there was anybody else in the building involved in it. Kotite's big thing was, I'll never forget a Kotite quote. My point is that this goes back for decades, this whole coaches versus scouts. And Kotite said, you can't have pride of authorship. You can't have pride of authorship, which is his way of saying egos can't be involved. you have to do what's best for the team. And I think that's exactly what Andy Weidel, I think, talked about yesterday. You just can't have egos in this thing, because you need to be doing what's best for the team. So you wrote a good piece about all this, and you expressed it better than I probably just did. But I would say read Dave's piece, and it really gets to the heart of this issue of the scouts and coaches working together to get players that fit what this team needs to do.
Yeah, I think Andy Weidel's a guy we don't talk about enough, and I kind of wonder how last year, or how much last year bothered him, because he's the head of the scouting department. I mean, he's, what is he, vice president of player personnel? Is that his title? I mean, that's basically the head personnel guy. He's in charge of the scouts. I wonder how he took it last year when Howie bucks the draft board that he set. And if, like, you have this guy, he has a really long history in scouting. Trust him. Use him. Trust him. I don't know why you have him if you don't trust him.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And yeah, it had to be. I mean, it's got to be frustrating. I mean, if Andy,
and maybe it'll help now. They have, so like John Gannon has a background in scouting. I think Denard Wilson, the DB's coach, does. Jeremiah Washburn is kind of a quasi coach scout. Maybe those guys can help bridge the gap a little bit. That would be my hope if I'm Andy Weidel.
Well, I think it all comes down to Howie trusting his people, and he has to do it, because let's be honest, Howie's strength is not evaluating personnel. It just isn't, and it never will be, and it never was. And I think he's gotten better at it, but it's just not. It's not his best attribute, I think is fair to say. He's got to trust his guys. If he has good people around him, and I think Andy Weidel's a really good scout. He's had success. I mean, trust him, listen.
Yeah.
Understand your own limitations.
Exactly. And we'll see if it happens. It's all talk for now. And it's easy to get along before you start making picks. So we'll see how it all unfolds. The last thing we wanted to talk about from the press conference was about wide receiver size. I have no idea who we could be talking about, but there was a lot of talk on Wednesday about players coming in all shapes and sizes and not getting too worried about that. And I think that's important as we look at this draft. And there happens to be a first-round receiver named DeVonta Smith who we found out weighed in at 166 pounds at the combine.
Yeah, there's never been anybody drafted in the first 20 picks that size. Haven't been very many players other than kickers at that size, period, much less drafted early. I think 175 to 180 is considered small, and he's 166. And it is a risk, because there's a reason, guys that size haven't. I mean, you worry about his ability to get off the line of scrimmage. You worry about his durability and injuries at that size. Deshaun is probably the closest. Although, he's taller. He's 6'1". So that answers some of the things as far as, he's not a short, small, tiny little guy. He almost like Pinkston. Like Pinkston's.
That actually makes him look skinnier.
Yeah, a little skinnier than Pinkston, but just as tall. I think Pinkston was probably 6'1", 175. Mm-hmm. But that's what he was listed. I don't think there's any chance he was 175, honestly. But I don't know how many Eagles fans want to hear that comparison. But obviously, he was a better player in college than that Pinkston was. Well, Pinkston was decent, and Pinkston had an okay career. But the quotes were interesting. Howie said, it's just what you just said. I think the first part is good players come in all shapes and sizes. We're not going to discriminate based on any of those things. And then Nick talked for like 11 minutes about it. But he basically said the same thing. If a guy can play, we're not going to be scared off by his stature.
Nick specifically talked about the X receiver position, which typically are bigger players. You think of like, the Eagles got Alshon, he was their X, or like Julio Jones. Like you think of the X being a bigger player, it's generally a harder position to play. Those guys are tougher to find. That's why Jamar Chase is going to be the first receiver taken this year. But on the flip side, Sirianni pointed out that, in Indy, they had T.Y. Hilton as their X, and he's what, 5'9", 5'10"? He's a short guy. And it's all about, he made the point that it's all about beating one-on-ones. If you can get open, and DeVonta Smith has shown an ability to get off the line, he's great off the line and get open, then he can play. I don't know if he'd be the X, but he's a good player. And I think that was their point. And they left themselves enough room that they could take him, but they don't have to take him,
I thought that was an interesting quote. He talked about T.Y., who was 5'9", 180, who he had obviously in Indy. He talked about Dwayne Bowe, who's 6'2", 220 and played the slot. He talked about Keenan Allen, who was 6'3", 200, and he had in San Diego and played the slot. I mean, it's a fair point. And I think the slot position has evolved a lot too. It used to be like that was your third best receiver. Mm-hmm. That's not the case anymore also. So I don't know. I still don't think they're going to take him, but if he's there at 12, it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, it will be.
Because it is a risk. There is a reason nobody that size has, really, really had a career in the NFL. 166 is tiny, but he's a special talent. The production's there. He's got all the traits except
that's the point. There's never been a guy at that size who's played this well at the college level. So
exactly.
It's you can't find one, but you also can't find one to compare him who's like, there's no one who's failed similarly, because there's just no comparison really.
Right. But they might look at Waddle as a safer pick.
Waddle's short. He's built heavier, but he's shorter than Smith.
Yeah, he is. Smith's tall, but it comes down to like you messed up on the J-Jaw pick. You may have messed up on the Rager pick. I don't want to say conclusively, but it doesn't look good. They can't afford to get this thing wrong.
Yeah, you're right. If they take a receiver, buckle up. It's eventually they're going to hit one, right?
I don't know. I remember when Trey Thomas was drafted, and the Eagles had blown so many offensive tackle first-round picks, and he got up at the press conference and said, "I'm not another Eagles first-round bust." It was tremendous, because they drafted him, Antone, and Jermaine Mayberry is a first-round pick, ended up being a pretty good guard, but Trey just got up and said, "I'm not another Eagles first-round bust." It was great.
That's great. Real quick, I wanted to go through, and it's a great lead-in because we were talking about DeVonta Smith. I put out a crowdsourced mock draft. It was a lot of fun. I used a simulator on the Draft Network. It's a fun.
This was a great idea you had. I think you really came up with a great idea on this one. I thought
let me go ahead and give credit to our buddy Phil Perry up in New England. He came up with this idea, and I just stole it because we work for the same company. I'm allowed to do that. But it's a good idea, and it was a lot of fun. So I want to put it through the Draft Network simulator, and if you haven't played with that, give that a go. It's a lot of fun. And what I did was basically for every Eagles pick, I would see how the board would fall. I kind of guided it a little bit because I'd have to pick 4 players, and I put it out on a Twitter poll. So I figured we'd just go through each of these picks, and we'll see if we agree with the fan picks or if we would have chosen someone else. In the first round, a bunch of quarterbacks came off the board, and then Patrick Surtain and Jalen Waddle came off right before. The Cowboys took Surtain and the Giants took Waddle. So the 4 options I was left with were DeVonta Smith, J.C. Horn, Micah Parsons, and Kwity Paye.
And I would probably go J.C. Horn.
I think I would have too in this case. And the way I've put those players is, for me, Surtain, Waddle, Horn, Smith, just in the order of the players who I like the most. So I'd stick with that and I'd go Horn. But I think Smith I wasn't surprised Smith won this.
No, I mean, I think fans are going to pick the wide receiver every time.
I mean, he's a Heisman Trophy winner too. Yeah,
I mean, he's really good. Yeah, he's really good. I was surprised Parsons was as low as he was. I think he got 14%, and Kwity Paye got a couple votes.
Yeah, people would not be happy with that. He got 1.2% of the vote. Not great. At 37, so you have your receiver, and I made sure everyone knew what position was taken before. So the choices at 37 were Kelvin Joseph, cornerback from Kentucky, Asante Samuel Jr., Samuel Cosme, and Carlos Basham. And no surprise here. I think there's probably a lot of name recognition, but Asante Samuel took this. I had a few questions about the Georgia corners. They were both gone, I believe, by 37.
Interesting. Basham, I mean, are we picking these like, exclusive of who we picked in the first round, or
No.
is this just based on these four guys? Yeah, I mean, Asante,
why would that matter?
Well, because I wouldn't take two corners.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I got you. Yeah,
but I mean, there are questions about Asante. I don't think he is his dad. I would probably pick Basham out of that group.
Yeah,
he barely got any votes. But
yeah, he was the lowest. I was surprised he got 3%, and I think you kind of have to. So I didn't put any receivers here because the likelihood of them going receiver, I didn't think was very good. So the first picks kind of shaped the way the rest of the mock draft went.
Who would you go here, Cosme?
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty strong pick.
Yeah,
he got 6%, but I also like Kelvin Joseph. He's a little longer. I like a little more length to corner. Nothing against Asante, but man, it's been a while since we've seen some Eagles corners with a little bit more length, and I like that idea. The third round, the first pick in the third round, the choices were Josh Myers, interior offensive line from Ohio State, Jamar Johnson from Indiana, the safety, Jordan Smith, defensive end from UAB, and Tommy Tremble, tight end from Notre Dame. This one, Jamar Johnson, it was close. It was between Jamar Johnson and Josh Myers. Johnson got 40%, Myers got 36%.
I love Josh Myers at this spot.
Do you?
I think that would be a heck of a pick, right there. I don't know if he'll be there, but if he is, that would be my pick.
Yeah, I like the pick from the fans here. Jamar Johnson is a fun player. He's a versatile safety. He has great ball skills. I think he would fit really well. And that's a need too. I mean, it's not as pressing as some of the other needs, but I might have gone with him. I think I agree with the fans there.
I feel pretty confident they're going to take an interior O lineman in the third round with one of those picks.
Well, maybe you would take it with this one too. At 84, the picks were Pete Warner from Ohio State, Quincy Roche from Miami, Kendrick Green from Illinois, and Kenneth Gainwell from Memphis. In this case, Green would have been my guy here.
Yeah. I like both those players. I like the Ohio State kid a little more, but third round still too early to take a linebacker. I don't know much about Roche. I'm not.
No, well, he was from Temple, played at Temple, and went to Miami last year. He's a good player. He put up decent production in college. I don't think he's like, if you look at the Miami guys, he doesn't have the ceiling of like a Jalen Phillips, but he might have a little higher floor because of that.
You bring up Gainwell, and running back's interesting because I do think they're going to take a running back at some point.
And that running back's really interesting because he has all those receiver skills.
Yeah.
He got the lowest percentage, and I get that, but he's a fun player in a Sirianni offense.
I don't think it's out of the question that they would go running back in the third round.
And a player like that is multiple. It's not like he's a between the tackles runner and you think, oh, he's limited. I mean, you can do a lot with Gainwell, and I think the coaching staff would really like him.
He's my guy. I'm going to go Gainwell. I don't think It could happen. I mean, it could happen. I don't. I mean, we don't talk at all about running backs, but I mean, and they signed Jordan Howard, but I don't think he fits um, into the equation. You're not going to not draft somebody because of Jordan Howard.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it has to do with your evaluation of Boston Scott. I like Boston. I think he's a nice player, but I certainly don't think having Boston Scott precludes you from taking a guy like Gainwell at all.
I don't think it should. Fourth round.
I don't think it will.
The options here: David Moore, interior offensive line, Grambling State; Cameron Sample from Tulane; Jalen Twyman from Pittsburgh; Ramondre Stevens from Oklahoma, the running back. Interesting here. Moore takes it. This was, I think, fans realizing, oh, we need interior offensive line. I want to take him here. I really like Sample of this group. I listed him as a D end. He's kind of a tweener. I think he can play inside, he can play outside, and I like that versatility. I get that scares people, but I think he's probably the best player of these four.
Well, I think it scares you in the first round if a guy doesn't have, a position, but in the fourth round, versatility is a positive. If this guy can come in and contribute 30 snaps inside, outside, I know they say they want to start at every position, but in the fourth round, a guy like Sample to me is a nice pick.
Yeah, I would have liked that. Fifth round, 150. The options here were Chuba Hubbard, Rashad Weaver, Kenny Yeba, Ambry Thomas from Michigan. Chuba Hubbard ends up winning at 41%. I don't know who I'd go with here. I probably wouldn't be Chuba.
Roly poly. I just want a guy named Chuba on the team.
I get that. Yeboah is interesting, though.
When you get to the fifth round, you're just looking for names. You're looking for a guy named Chuba.
Yeboah is interesting, though, from Ole Miss, the tight end. That tight end is a need no one's talking about.
Well, when you have, Richard Rodgers is one phone call away. No, they're going to take a tight end at some point. Yeboah is an interesting name.
All right, let's go to the sixth round. 189. The choices here were Malcolm Kuntz from Buffalo, Rashad Wildgoose from Wisconsin, Trey McKitty from Georgia, and Simi Fehoko from Stanford. Kuntz wins it here. He might not be available. He might be long. He's a weird guy to figure out. Most people list him as like a late round pick, and then Mel Kiper put him in the second round of his mock draft last week. So kind of a disconnect with where he might go.
Well, he's small.
Short.
He's short, but he's productive. He'll get to the quarterback. It's certainly you can understand why people would pick him, because first of all, he's at a position where they need, and but yeah, what is he, 245?
Yeah, he hovers around there.
So,
but he's short. So he's built fine. He's like 6 foot.
Oh, is he that short? He'd be my guy there.
Yeah, he's got a ton of upside.
But yeah, I don't think he'll be there.
And if you have a chance to draft a guy named Wild Goose, you have to at least think about it.
It's definitely in the mix.
Yeah. The other
Chuba and Wild Goose in the same draft, you've had a good day.
Mustafa Johnson, Josh Palmer, Cameron Bynum, Felipe Franks. Mustafa Johnson won this defensive tackle from Colorado. And then this was like where they had back-to-back picks. So it's Mustafa Johnson at 224, and then 225 was Josh Palmer. I just picked both of those guys. Felipe Franks, though, if you're talking like developmental late round quarterback, I think he's a guy to keep an eye on.
Well, there's the Brian Johnson connection, which is interesting. Certainly puts him on their radar. They're going to draft a developmental guy somewhere. And you don't want to, that's why you don't want to draft a quarterback in the middle rounds. But when you get down to the late rounds, that's where because I think the hit rate, I'd have to look it up, but I would guess the hit rate on quarterbacks from sixth round on, including undrafted, is just as high as third, fourth, and fifth rounds.
What do you mean hit rate?
Just to get starter caliber quarterbacks.
You think so?
Yeah. The rate. Yeah, I would think so. I just don't. I think you're either getting quarterbacks in the first half of the first round or in the sixth round undrafted. You see those guys because then they have the time to develop. Nobody's rushing them to play. Like Sudfeld. I mean, I think that's why. No, that's a bad example. But they don't get rushed. They get time to develop, and nobody's really paying attention to them, and they just keep getting better and better, and they get a chance and they play well. You see that a lot. I'm going to do some research on that, but I definitely do. Back to the topic at hand, I do think they're going to take a QB in the sixth or seventh round, a guy to develop.
And then Josh Palmer, I think that would be a really good late round pick. They can get it if they want to double dip at receiver. They can get one in the late round. It's kind of like last year's class. I mean, there's going to be decent value late. In the seventh round, the options were Matt Bushman, tight end from BYU, Avery Williams from Boise State, Royce Newman from Ole Miss, Christian Uphoff from Illinois State. Some decent options here this late, actually, and in a class that's not really considered to be that deep. Bushman won it here. Interesting player, older prospect, as a lot of the BYU guys are. He's 25, and he's coming off a torn Achilles, which is why he's available this late, but led BYU in receiving in 18 and 19. And we know how much the Eagles reportedly were interested in Zach Wilson. So if they're watching old Zach Wilson tape, they're going to see a lot of Matt Bushman.
That's true. I think Uphoff is an interesting name.
The hot name.
He is a hot name. I mean, he had a great Senior Bowl, kind of put himself on the map. I think they're going to have to load up on some safeties, multiple safeties. You would think a couple of them, maybe. And he's a good name. I like him in that spot. And
Royce Newman, I mean, I like the idea of another versatile lineman late if you're going to keep a lot of these 6th and 7th round picks. And then the last one, Avery Williams, was still available. He ends up being our last pick in the 7th round. A few options there. Josh Kando from Florida State, Landon Young from Kentucky, Manny Rugamba from Miami, Ohio, I think I'm his only fan. No one else ever seems to talk about him, but I like him a lot. But that was it. It was a fun exercise. And by the end of it, I was like, all right, fantasy pretty good.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I mean, I would stray from their picks on a few of them, but if they can get the guys that the fans pick, they'll have had a good draft.
That's the thing. It's like,
send this to Howie. Send him the link.
Howie, here, just do this. Everyone will be happy.
I'm not saying draft these guys, but just read this.
I'm excited. We're a week away, Rube.
Yeah, a week from today. That's right. You're right. And it's always a fun day. I wish we were down there in the building. Just it's always fun being in NovaCare on draft day. It's just a lot of energy in the building and excitement. And we're in the auditorium with the giant screen, theater screen. And watch it all play out. But hopefully next year we're down there.
Yeah, I hope so. Good snacks. The Eagles do a good snack job on draft.
They do. Yeah, they do. And I'll miss that. I mean, I'll miss the snacks. So like Sack, what time's the cafeteria open?
All right. You got anything else before we wrap this one up?
No. Have you seen Embiid's shot at the end of the game last night, by the way?
I have. I mean, that ball was all the way in.
That would have been the greatest shot in Sixers history. I mean, because it wasn't just at the end of a quarter, down.
You just mean like skill level shot? Obviously, it's not like meaning, but like skill level shot, you mean?
Yeah. Like I remember US Reed hitting a full court to win an NCAA tournament game. That was like in the 80s. But I mean, it would have tied the game, and they were down like 7 with like a minute. I think it was like 68 seconds left. I think Korkmaz hit a 3 from the left corner. Embiid he was limping around. I worry about his health. This team's really banged up. I mean, they play without Ben, without Tobias, without Seth Curry. And now Embiid's banged up with that left knee again. But, I mean, he basically, it was 0.8 of a second left. And he gets a missed free throw and he knows the clock. He's aware.